lecture video to walk you through some common ways in which we use Google Sheets in chemistry lab. So one of the things that you would want to do is enter in your values into the Google Sheets. And as an example here, I have concentration values that I want to enter. And I write down in the heading for my column, I would write down what I'm entering, so in this case concentration, and then in parentheses I remind myself what units I'm using. This is important because occasionally I will see someone enter in the value with the units in Google Sheets, and what happens is Excel and Google Sheets will treat this like text. And you know that this is happening because you'll find that it is indented to the left of the cell, whereas if it was considered a number, as the number 0.1 would be, you would find that it is indented towards the right of the cell. So that's one way that you can check if there are issues with data entry. Often the numbers that we're entering for concentrations might be fairly small numbers, and it's useful to enter them in with scientific notation. So as an example, if I want to enter in the number 1 times 10 to the minus 3, in Excel I would type that in as 1 e to the minus 3 and hit enter. And you can see that if I actually wanted to increase or decrease the number of decimal places here, I could do that using these buttons. So if this number should really only have 2 significant figures, I might take away a decimal place or add them, as the case might be. And the other thing I may want to do is display this number not in scientific notation, but using decimals. So if I'd rather see it in that format, I can go to this 1, 2, 3 and change it to number. And you can see now that it's not really showing me the value, it's just truncating the number after 2 decimal places. So in this case, I want to go back and I want to increase the number of decimal places until I actually see the number. It's really important to recognize that Google Sheets or Excel don't really have any idea about the correct number of sig figs, so that's a judgment call that you as a chemist will make after you've done all your calculations in terms of what you should report your values out as. All right, so that's going over how you would enter values in. So we'll also go through some common calculations that you might do using Google Sheets and how to enter those. So an example shown here, and I'm going to just make the font larger. An example shown here is for a dilution calculation. So I am looking at an example where we are looking at a solution of sodium chloride, and it has an initial concentration of the stock solution, which is 1.5 times 10 to the minus 3. And once again, my units are here, so I know that it's looking at molarity. I am taking this solution, and I'm taking different volumes of that solution. So those volumes that I'm using of that solution are listed in the table below here. And I'm diluting it to a final volume of 100 mils. So I'm going to use my M1V1 is equal to M2V2 in this formula. And to show you how you calculate for our unknown, which is M2 in this case, you would start your calculation out by typing equal to. So that's what tells Google Sheets that you're looking to do a calculation with whatever you're entering next. So I'm going to do equal to, open parentheses, and so M2 is equal to M1 multiplied by V1 divided by V2, and I can hit enter. So you can see that it's done the math for me and tells me it's going to be a tenfold dilution. Okay? So you can do the same thing for the next line, which is now your M1 is still the same value. You can multiply it by the new V1 and divide it by the same V2 because the final volume is always a constant. All right. The other nice thing to do is when you're using a number over and over is learn how to treat this value as a constant, which is what the next example will show you. So in this example, we're doing something that we also do fairly commonly in lab. So let me increase my font size again. All right, so I have a graph here, which looks like a Beer's law graph because it's absorbance versus concentration, right? And I have my equation for the line as a reminder that y is mx plus b. And you can see that the spreadsheet gives me the equation and the values for my slope, which I wrote down in a cell, the y-intercept, which I wrote down there. And I usually make notes for myself just so I can remember what the numbers represent. And then I'm going to use a series of y values, absorbance values, to calculate the x, which is the concentration. So that's our unknown in this case. So to solve for this, just like in the previous example, I'm going to type equal to, and then open parentheses, and then I'm solving for x, so I would do y minus b. And because b is a constant, for all of these calculations, b is going to be the same value. I'm going to indicate that by putting dollar signs around b. So y minus b, and then divided by the slope, which is also a constant, because all of these calculations will use the same slope value from the graph. I'm going to put my dollar signs around it as well. And now when I hit enter, you can see that Google Sheets is recognizing I want to do a series of calculations. So it says suggested autofill, and I'll say, sure, why not? Hit enter, but I'm going to check, right? So you can see that that was the one I typed in, and it calculated the value for x given this value for y. And if you look at the next one, it is now using A12. So it's using the next absorbance value, but it's going back to my constants. So it's going back to the same y-intercept and dividing by the same slope, which is exactly what I wanted to do. If I hadn't used the dollar signs, it would use the cell right below it when I was doing the calculation, which is not what we want to do. So anytime you're using the same constant over and over and you have it typed in just one cell, the dollar sign is a really good trick to know how to use. All right, so those are some of the common calculations that you might have to do for the lab today. And if you have other questions, you can always check in with your instructors.